I found a hidden camera in my bedroom while cleaning, but now the family is angry with me because I called the police. I swear my heart jumped out of my chest. I froze for at least 10 seconds, staring at the camera as if it was going to come to life and attack me. Maybe I've watched too many sci-fi and horror movies. Once the initial shock passed, I grabbed it and started to panic. Who put it here? How long has it been here? Why is it here? I live alone, so my mind went to the darkest corners of paranoia. Was someone watching me sleep? Watching me change? Had someone gained access to my private moments? I felt like my safe space had been completely invaded. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed my phone and immediately Googled, what to do if you find a hidden camera. The first thing I read was that I should leave the house, and I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed the essentials and ran out as if my life depended on it. I drove straight to the police station, and let me tell you, explaining to the officer on duty that I found a hidden camera in my bedroom was one of the strangest conversations I've ever had. The officer was professional, of course, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in a bad TV movie. However, they took my report seriously, which was a relief. An officer even came back to my house with me to check if there were any other cameras or anything suspicious. When they told me that everything seemed fine, I didn't feel fine. Sure, there was nothing else obvious, but the idea that someone had been in my house without me knowing gave me chills. I was so nervous that I didn't even want to grab clothes or anything, I just wanted to leave. So I called my best friend, Mia, and asked if I could stay at her place. She told me to come over immediately, and I practically ran to my car. The next day, I called my husband, Carlos, who is 28. He's in the military and stationed in another state, so I didn't want to ruin his night by calling him in a panic at 2 in the morning. I waited until the next morning, when I was a little calmer, or at least calm enough to explain without breaking down crying every 5 seconds. When I told him about the hidden camera, he was silent for literally 10 seconds. Finally, he said, "Day, this is not just scary, it's dangerous. What if you have a stalker?" I started overthinking again, asking him questions like, "Do you think someone has been following me? Should I check my car for trackers?" Carlos tried to calm me down, but I could tell he was a little panicked too. After discussing it for a while, he suggested something I had been dreading. "Babe, I think you should stay with my parents for a while, at least until we figure this out." Now look, I love Carlos and respect his family, but his mother, Anna, 47, and let's just say we're not exactly best friends. She has always been a little too opinionated, and I've always felt that deep down, she doesn't think I'm good enough for her son. Don't get me wrong, she's never been outright mean to me, but there's always this tension between us. Staying at her house felt like jumping from one uncomfortable situation to another, but Carlos was right. I couldn't stay at Mia's house forever, and I definitely couldn't go back to my own house. So I sucked it up and asked Carlos to call his mom and explain everything to her. I didn't want to deal with Anna's questions or her classic, "Are you sure you're not overreacting, dear?" tone. A few hours later, Anna called me herself. Her voice was softer than usual and she said, "Day, pack your things and come here immediately. You shouldn't be alone right now." That took me by surprise. It was probably the kindest thing she had ever said to me. I packed my things at Mia's house and drove to Anna's. Her house was only about 30 minutes away. To my surprise, Anna was very kind to me and took care of me. I stayed there for a week before I felt like I could go back to my house. The police were still in the process of getting information from the camera company. I tried to act normal, but deep down, every little creak or noise made me jump. I started leaving the bathroom door slightly open when I showered, and I couldn't sleep without a light on. Every corner of my house felt suspicious. Last week, I got a frantic call from Anna, saying that the police were at their house and taking Marco, 16 years old, Carlos's younger brother, into custody, and that she was blaming me for it. I was terrified and furious, and somewhere in between all of that, I could hear Marco crying in the background. I put on my shoes and practically ran out the door. They told me to go to the police station immediately, and that's when I found out that the footage from the camera had been sent to the IP address of Marco's laptop. Sweet, nerdy Marco, who stayed up all night playing video games and was always nice to me. Anna was yelling at me in the police station lobby, saying that it was all my fault, that I shouldn't have filed a report, and that this was going to ruin Marco's life. Carlos called me shortly after and was conflicted. He kept saying things like, "Day, he's just a kid, he made a stupid mistake. We can't let this ruin his future." Even though I understood his point, I couldn't just cancel a police report. It's not like sending an email and pressing undo. The system was already in motion. The following days were filled with police interviews, lawyer meetings, and awkward silences in Anna's house. Marco wasn't allowed to come home immediately, and Anna would go silent whenever she looked at me. It hurt because, despite everything, I didn't hate Marco, I was just disappointed. I kept replaying every interaction I had with him, trying to find signs I might have missed. Had he ever been weird? Had he ever acted out of place? But the truth was, he had always seemed like a normal teenager. Eventually, it was decided that Marco would do 100 hours of community service. And since he was a minor, his record would be sealed. It wasn't the worst outcome, but it still felt wrong. Anna didn't speak to me much after that. Now my entire in-law family is angry with me, and it's not even my fault. Marco was the one who acted like a creep, and he never even apologized, not once. He couldn't even look me in the eyes when we saw each other, he just ran off. That was sad for me because I had always thought Marco and I were close, almost like siblings. I even helped him with his homework a few times when he struggled with math. What am I supposed to do here? Just pretend none of this happened, sweep it under the rug and let him get away with it? Update 1. I know it's been 3 months since I made that post, but I have some updates. Honestly, my hands are still shaking as I write this because something happened yesterday, and I have no idea how to process it. It was a normal, quiet Sunday. I was in my pajamas when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I assumed it might be a delivery or a neighbor. But no, when I opened the door, it was Marco. We hadn't spoken since everything happened, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to talk to him. He looked nervous, playing with his sleeves and avoiding eye contact. I asked, "What are you doing here?" And he said he needed to talk to me. I thought, okay, maybe this is the moment. Maybe he's finally here to apologize. I stepped aside, let him in, and he sat down on my couch. I didn't know whether to sit with him or awkwardly stand by the door, trying to be a halfway decent hostess. I asked, "Do you want something to eat? A soda?" But he just shook his head and said, "No, let's get straight to the point." Marco took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I'm not the one responsible." Excuse me? What was he talking about? He was the one whose IP address matched the camera data. He was the one taken away by the police. How could he not be responsible? I told him he was the one who ordered the camera and that the evidence pointed to him. But he told me yes, he ordered the camera, but it wasn't for him, it was for Anna. I asked, "Why would you order a camera for Anna to spy on me?" He looked so uncomfortable, like he was trying to force the words out of his throat. Finally, he said, "She told me it was for her office. She said she needed it for security reasons. I didn't think much of it, so I ordered it for her." I asked, "But Marco, how did it end up in my house, in my bedroom?" He told me he thinks she must have placed it during my birthday party when we were all at my house. I somehow managed to say, "Are you telling me that Anna did this? That Anna put a camera in my bedroom?" Marco nodded but quickly added, "I don't know for sure, but I swear, Day, I didn't do it. I would never do something like that to you." Then he broke down crying, full-on sobbing, face in his hands, shoulders shaking. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there, frozen, watching him cry while my brain tried to make sense of everything he had just told me. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to ask, "Why didn't you tell me any of this before, Marco? Why now?" He told me that when Anna found out I had filed a police report, she pulled him aside and said, "They won't be able to catch you, and even if they do, you're a minor, you won't do real jail time. But if they find out it was me, I'll go to prison." Marco said he didn't say anything because he wanted to protect his mom. And well, I get it. He's a kid, a scared, confused kid who thought he was protecting the person who's supposed to protect him. But that doesn't make this whole mess any easier to digest. He kept talking about how he had been avoiding me because he couldn't stand the idea of looking me in the eyes and feeling guilty about everything. He said that every time he thought of me, all he could see was the camera, the police, and the way I looked at him when it all started. And then came the part that really broke me. Apparently, the news spread around Marco's high school. The kids found out about the whole camera incident. He told me that people started avoiding him, whispering when he walked by, treating him like a criminal. He told me he's been completely ostracized, no friends, no one to sit with at lunch, nothing. And even though he knows he can't make them believe him, at least he wanted me to know the truth. At that point, I couldn't even be mad at him anymore. I was just sad. Sad for him, sad for me, sad for the absolute disaster Anna had created and thrown both of us into. I handed him a tissue, and we sat in silence for a while. Eventually I asked, "Marco, do you have any idea why Anna would do this? How? Was there a reason? Did she ever say anything that could explain it?" He shook his head and said he didn't know, but he mentioned something that stuck with me. Apparently, a few weeks before my birthday party, Anna had started making weird comments about me to Marco, things like, "She's too good for Carlos, don't you think?" Or "Sometimes I feel like she's hiding something from us." At the time, Marco said he didn't think much of it. He figured maybe his mom was just being overprotective or, I don't know, nosy. But now, looking back, he thinks she was already planning something. I asked him if he thought Anna was trying to catch me doing something. What, was she trying to find proof that I was cheating, stealing, or who knows what? Marco said he honestly didn't know. I don't know what to do. I haven't told Carlos yet. He's working, and I don't want to drop this bomb on him over the phone, but I know I have to tell him. He's coming home next weekend. A part of me is scared that he won't believe me. I mean, how do you even bring something like this up in conversation? Honey, so, your mom might have been the one who put a hidden camera to spy on me. What do you think? At the same time, Marco's timing seems odd. Why now? Why, after 3 months, did he suddenly decide to come clean? Is he telling the truth? Or is he just trying to shift the blame? I have so many questions and zero answers. I've been pacing around my house since yesterday, trying to decide what to do. Should I confront Ana directly? Should I go back to the police with this information? Should I wait for Carlos to come home and talk to him first? Any suggestions? Update 2. First of all, thank you for all your comments and suggestions on my last post. So, here's what happened. Carlos got home early yesterday morning. I was pacing around the living room like a caged animal, and as soon as he walked in, I basically blurted out the entire story all at once. I told him about Marco showing up at our house, about what he said, about how he had been carrying this guilt and fear all this time. Carlos just looked at me for a second, then shook his head and said, "Marco is lying, my mom would never do that." But I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Carlos, I saw Marco. I saw how he cried, how he could barely look me in the face. He's not lying, he's scared, and he's been carrying this all on his own." Carlos said we needed to sort this out right now, and in the blink of an eye, we were in the car, driving straight to Ana's house. Let me tell you, those 30 minutes in the car were the most uncomfortable and silent 30 minutes of my life. Carlos was gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and I just stared out the window, trying not to throw up. When we got to Ana's house, Marco wasn't there. Apparently, he was out, so we had to wait. Ana greeted us with her usual warm smile and acted like nothing was wrong. She offered us coffee and asked if we wanted to stay for dinner, and Carlos said yes. I could tell he wanted to wait until Marco got home before confronting anyone. Dinner was so tense. I could barely eat a single bite. Marco eventually arrived, sat at the table, and gave me a quick nervous glance before looking down at his plate. We ate in silence for about 5 minutes before Carlos just couldn't hold it in anymore. He put down his fork, looked Marco straight in the eyes and said, "Marco, Day told me what you said. I want to know why you're lying about Mom." Marco looked at me, then back at his plate. I gave him a small nod, like saying, "It's okay, you can say it." Marco took a deep breath, sat up straight, and said, "I'm not lying, Carlos. It wasn't me, it was Mom. She told me to keep quiet." Ana turned to Marco with an icy look and said, "Marco, that's enough, stop making up stories." And then, everything exploded. Marco started yelling, Ana started yelling back. Carlos was trying to get them both to calm down, and I was just sitting there, staring at my half-eaten pasta like it was going to give me answers. But then Marco's voice cracked, and he started crying, really crying. Through tears he said, "Mom, please stop lying. You told me they wouldn't catch me because I'm a kid. You said you'd go to prison if I told the truth. Please, just tell the truth." And then Ana's face changed. She stopped yelling, stopped trying to dodge the subject. She just sank into her chair and covered her face with her hands. "Okay, yes, it was me. I did it." Carlos asked her why she would do something like this, that I had never given her any reason to distrust me. And Ana just started rambling about how she had a feeling something wasn't right, how she wanted to protect Carlos, how she thought I was hiding something. She kept saying things like, "I wasn't going to use the recordings for anything bad. I just wanted to be sure." Sure of what, Ana? That I wasn't secretly a villain plotting world domination from my kitchen? Carlos was silent for a long time after that. Then he simply said, "I have never felt so hurt in my entire life." He stood up, grabbed his keys and said, "I need to go." I followed him outside. The drive home was completely silent again. When we got back, Carlos went straight to our bedroom, closed the door, and didn't come out for hours. I sat on the couch just staring at the TV, not even registering what I was watching. At some point, Carlos finally came down. He sat next to me and said, "I don't know how to process this. My mom, my own mom, did this. To us. To you." And honestly, I didn't have an answer for him. We haven't talked much since then. I can tell Carlos is devastated, not just because of what his mom did, but because he defended her so fiercely when this all started. And me? I'm exhausted. Emotionally, mentally, in every way. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if Carlos is going to cut ties with Ana, or if he'll try to rebuild some kind of relationship with her. But I do know one thing. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine anymore. Ana crossed a line that can't just be undone. Trust is one of those things that, once broken, can never go back to what it was. For now, Carlos and I are just taking it one day at a time. I'll update again if anything major happens, but honestly, I think it's going to take a long time to untangle this mess. Update 3. It's only been a week since my last update. Things have been moving so fast, and every time I think we've hit the peak of this roller coaster, it just keeps going higher. Carlos and I have been talking a lot, deep emotional conversations, the what do we do now kind. I told him straight up that I'm not ready to talk to Ana again, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will be. Carlos understands where I stand, but I can see how much it's tearing him apart. He's always been so close to his mom, she was like his best friend, and now he's stuck in this limbo where he feels like he's betraying her by not talking to her. But he also knows what she did was really serious. But yesterday, things got even crazier. It was around 6 in the evening, Carlos was in the shower, and I was on my phone in the living room when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was Marco, with a duffel bag in his backpack. Before I could say anything, he just said, "Mom kicked me out." I let him in, sat him down on the couch, and asked what had happened. Apparently, Ana and Marco had another fight after Carlos stopped answering her calls. Marco said she was furious, like screaming and throwing things. Furious. She told him he had ruined everything by telling us the truth and that he was no longer welcome in her house. She kicked out her own son because he told the truth. I just can't comprehend it. When Carlos got out of the shower and saw Marco sitting on the couch with his bags, he looked between us and said, "What happened?" Marco told him everything. How Ana blamed him. How she said he was being disloyal to her. How she basically threw him out like he meant nothing. Carlos didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat next to Marco, put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You can stay here for as long as you need." And that was that. We set up the guest room for Marco. I made him something to eat, and then Carlos and I stayed up talking again. Carlos told me he's been avoiding Ana's calls. I think he's afraid to talk to her because he doesn't want to hear her excuses, or worse, have her try to manipulate him into forgiving her. On top of everything, Carlos is leaving for work soon. He's being sent abroad, and this has been planned for months. Now, the timing couldn't be worse. We've talked about what will happen when he's gone. Marco will stay here with me for now. Carlos said he'll keep in touch with both of us regularly, but I can tell he feels really guilty about leaving right now. Honestly, I don't mind having Marco stay with me. He's a good kid, and I know he just needs some stability and someone to show him that he's safe now. But it's still such a strange situation. I never imagined I'd be here, essentially acting as a guardian to my teenage brother-in-law because his mom turned into a villain. Oh, and Ana. She's been trying to contact Carlos non-stop, texts, calls, voicemails, you name it. Some are angry, accusing Carlos of choosing me over his own mother. Others are desperate, begging him to come see her so they can talk. But honestly, I don't think Carlos is ready to face her, and I don't blame him. For now, we're just taking things one day at a time. Marco is here, he's safe, and that's what matters. Carlos and I are just trying to stay afloat and support each other through this. Thank you for listening, Reddit. You have no idea how much it helps just to get all of this off my chest. Update 4. After talking it over with Carlos, we've decided that we need to do better for Marco, even if that means my mother-in-law facing consequences. And let's be real, my mother-in-law needs to face consequences. There's a reason Ana was so desperate to get in touch with Carlos. She wanted to stop us from doing what we did. But it's not just about what she did with the camera. Blaming her own son and making him suffer for it is beyond cruel. This is about a child, her own child. So, we've reported this new discovery to the authorities, and Marco has given his statement. Now, it's up to the police to continue their investigation. Ana has already found out about this because the police have contacted her. And while she's been calling Carlos, Marco, and even me, none of us have answered because we were advised that it could interfere with the ongoing investigation. Carlos has already left for work, but he's left me in charge of handling everything necessary to bring his mother to justice. I'm sorry I don't have more information to share right now, but I wanted to give you all an update so you're not left in the dark. Update 5. Saying that everything has exploded would be an understatement, but I can't think of another way to describe what's happened with Ana in this time. It wasn't hard to prove that Ana was involved in all of this, because we still had some messages where she incriminated herself. That was enough to clear Marco's record, which, while sealed, was still something that needed to be made right. But it was also enough to get Marco some kind of justice for everything he's been through. At this point, everything I went through, the fear, all of it, pales in comparison to what Marco has suffered because of his own mother. That's why it's a good thing that the truth has come out, even if something like this doesn't completely clear Marco's reputation. As for Ana, she's had to pay a $1,000 fine and will serve 90 days in prison for what she did, plus an additional 6 months for using her son to avoid punishment. Honestly, I don't think it's enough for everything she's done. But at least she's lost custody of Marco and also her job. This is finally starting to feel like justice. As for Marco, who we now have custody of, we've transferred him to a new high school. We all know how brutal high school can be when it comes to things like this. Once a rumor spreads, it's hard to stop it, no matter how much the truth comes out later. It's better for him to start fresh, without the weight of what his mother caused hanging over him. This has given him a lot of relief because going to his old school had become torture due to the bullying. Carlos still hasn't returned from his work assignment, but I've been keeping him updated constantly. He still believes what his mother did is unforgivable and is happy with how things have turned out. As for me, I feel better now, especially being responsible for Marco. It makes me feel less alone. He's even been teaching me how to play his video games. Although between us, I have understood nothing. This honestly feels like good preparation for when I become a mom one day, which will probably happen in a few years. Overall, it's good to finally close this chapter. A story that started as a horror show has ended on a much happier note.